shaped shadow, measuring approximately 150 to 200 foot across the wingspan. It was travelling almost exactly the same direction as us, which is due west, and overtaking us. I would say it was probably doing twice the speed that we were doing. Immediately we were a little bit concerned because the nature of the shadow was so sharp and well defined. You would expect it to be very close to where our aircraft was, so I was quite concerned about the possibility of a collision. Yeah. So we had a look around everywhere to see what it was that was creating the shadow. There was absolutely nothing in the sky at all, and it was clear blue sky. It was much clearer day than it is today. So we were really taken aback by it, and we were just at a loss as to what it was that was causing it. So we didn't really know what to do, so we just carried on basically to Carnarvon and reported it to the people there at the airport.
You logged it in your flying log, didn't you?
Yeah.
And your personal log, and I believe a log here at Barton as well.
Yeah, there's two logs. There's a personal flying log, and then there's also a log which is attached to the aeroplane. Anybody reports anything slightly unusual about the aeroplane or conditions of the day is put down on that log.
Did you talk to any air traffic controllers like Manchester Airport?
No, we didn't, because we were clear of both the Liverpool and the Manchester zone. We were a long way to go to Carnarvon, so we didn't really need to be in contact with anybody. We were still on Barton's frequency, but I thought it was inappropriate to notify them about it at the time.
Right, so we don't know whether they had it on radar, or even you were on radar to Manchester.
They tend to follow people that are fairly close to the zone on radar, just to make sure that they're not going to infringe into the airspace.
So you would have been on the radar?
It's possible that we would have been on radar, yes.
We won't know whether this thing causing the shadow was on their radar.
No idea.
Even though we couldn't see anything visually.
Nothing at all, absolutely. Yeah. We did a few clearing turns to make sure it wasn't behind us or above or below. Right. There was absolutely nothing.
Yeah. Well, since that event, we've had two other pilots contact us flying in a microlight on Sunday the 6th of July, so it's another Sunday event, and they were flying back from Cranfield in Bedfordshire from an aviation weekend, and they weren't too far from you. They were sort of Newton Willows, Haydock area, they thought.
Yeah.
And 1,200 feet, beautiful sunny day again, they said, and the triangle shadow passed them in the opposite direction. They were undecided about speed, between perhaps 60 miles an hour to 200. The two of them couldn't make their minds up, two brothers. So they were equally nonplussed and mystified by it all, because again they couldn't see an object causing the shadow.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. We may get some more information, I don't know.
At approximately 11:45 p.m. that same night, Peter and Wynne Seal, with their two sons Craig and Scott, were travelling along the M56 motorway in Cheshire when they too spotted a triangular-shaped craft between junctions 11 and 12. Here's David Caton again.
Well, on the night of Sunday the 1st of June, the Seal family, that's Mum and Dad, with sons Scott and Craig, who were 17 and 20 years of age, were coming back from Wales from holiday, back to Heaton Mersey and Stockport, and as they got to the junction 9 there, just behind us, over the M6, they saw this triangular object hovering over the farm behind me, with lights on each corner, blue and red, with white lights amongst them. Way back they thought it was some lights on a tower because they were so still. They got to just past the junction here by the embankment, and the triangle shot over the car at about 150 foot up, and they experienced a sort of buzzing, humming noise as it went over, and then it went on to the opposite side of the motorway and followed down towards Stockport in their direction, roughly about 200 yards into the field, and gradually pulling away from them, and after about a mile and a half, they seemed to be catching it up again, and it seemed to be looking as though it was going to land. Anyway, it slowed down, did a shallow sort of dive, and disappeared behind the trees and bushes, though they couldn't actually see it touch the ground because of the bushes. Anyway, they weren't inclined to stop on the motorway. They were very shaken up to see if the object came back up again, so they carried on home to Stockport.
There is no doubt in my mind that some of the so-called flying triangles, especially the smaller size versions, might well be some form of covert experimental aircraft. Take, for example, the following case.
We're here at Littondale in North Yorkshire. This entire region over the years has been synonymous with a great deal of UFO activity. At the river nearby, for instance, a farmer came across a glowing ball of light just a few feet above the surface water. The water underneath was bubbling. Just further across and beyond the river are some unusual stones. It's private land, but the whole area has been a regular scene of activity by SAS soldiers, presumably out on manoeuvres. But on Wednesday, the 14th of January 1998, two witnesses had just arrived home here when they looked at the valley behind me. They saw a red light. What happened next seems to indicate an appearance by the mysterious flying triangle.
Initially I thought perhaps a tornado. In fact, I was very, very convinced it was a tornado. It was soundless, but that again didn't surprise me. Vivian then looked up. The aircraft was directly overhead at this time. What did surprise me was the fact that it had green lights down one side, red lights along the other wing. I then looked directly upwards as the aircraft was overhead. There was two green lights on one of the wings on the side, another two red lights on the opposite wing, a small white light somewhere I would think between the red and the green lights, and a very, very large white light at the rear. At that point we could just make out a delta-shaped aircraft. It certainly wasn't a tornado, it was still soundless, and as it moved slightly past our position, we've got the big Hawkswick Moor Fell at the rear. There was a tremendous noise as it gained altitude, and it had to very, very quickly, otherwise it would probably have been straight into the fell. Didn't look like any aircraft that we see regularly flying over these tops. I'm absolutely convinced it was an aircraft. It looked quite similar in configuration to the Mirage, i.e. the delta shape, but we couldn't see a front and we couldn't see a rear. We couldn't see any assembly underneath, but definitely the wings were very, very sharp, which did surprise me. The noise was unusual, but that could have been because it was gaining altitude.
What were the features about this particular observation that distinguished it from, say, normal military overflights?
Yeah, this particular valley, as I say, is renowned for air exercises. Usually when you see one aircraft like this, it's usually followed very, very quickly by one or two chase aircraft. Being conversant with normal aircraft, you know, it was unusual in the sense that when it went overhead, there was a tremendous noise, a noise that I haven't heard before, and it moved at an angle then possibly 70 degrees to take it over the fell, which did surprise me. The noise was tremendous, but as I say, for 6-7 seconds it was absolutely silent. I couldn't explain or identify the aircraft. What was unusual again was that approximately 60 minutes later we heard the noise again, and we immediately went outside and we could see the aircraft moving directly west. Now of course 20 miles west of here there have been numerous observations of this so-called mysterious flying triangle. I would say this was definitely a man-made vehicle. I've no doubt about that, but I couldn't identify it, and it was definitely delta shape, and as far as I'm aware, the last real delta-shaped aircraft the RAF flew was the Vulcan bomber. It certainly wasn't that. This was small, manoeuvrable, maybe 35 feet in length, carried a light configuration which I haven't seen before, and as I say, we see aircraft moving over here at all times of the day and night.
Chance sightings of the flying triangles, often by credible and professional observers, has attracted the attention of numerous UFO researchers, keen to discover any clues as to their origin. Is there, for instance, anything to suggest that some of the flying triangles are indeed extraterrestrial? We put that question to leading British UFO investigator and former police officer, Tony Dodd.
The thing which distinguishes what I consider to be extraterrestrial vehicles are the enormous triangles, the ones which are as big as football pitches, which once again carry the characteristic either white light on each appendage or red whatever, and they usually have this red belly light. These things have been reported coming out of the sea. They've been reported hovering over fishing boats up in the Arctic Circle in the Atlantic. They've been reported hovering over motorways. Certainly I've had reports from over the M5 motorway, the M1, the M6, and we've had occasions where these have been reported in Scotland, of course. And then there was the famous case in Scotland where one of these gigantic triangles was seen to come down and land in a field, and the witnesses actually observed alien creatures coming from them.
How did these aliens manifest themselves?
Well, they didn't manifest it as such. What happened was they actually saw this craft on the ground, and they were no more than 50 yards away from it, and they had a pair of binoculars with them. And it appears that the aliens weren't aware they were being observed. There were a large number of the small aliens, the small which we would normally call the grey aliens.
What sort of numbers are we talking about?
Well, the witnesses said that at one stage they thought there could have been up to 100. And they seem to be working in groups, each under the supervision of a tall brown-faced, oriental-looking alien. They said the tall ones could have been anything up to 7 feet tall. And it was obvious when they'd been watching it for a few minutes that each one group of these small aliens was working under the supervision of one of these very large ones. And they were racing about in and out of the forest which was next to where the craft was down, carrying tubular and round objects, and they were going from the craft to the forest and back, and the witnesses weren't sure whether they were taking stuff from the craft to the forest or vice versa, but they were very graphic with the descriptions, and other things that they sort of described at the time, i.e. hovering balls, like glass balls which were dimpled like a golf ball. And inside one of these balls was one of these very large oriental aliens. This ball was hovering off the ground 15-20 feet, and it was slowly but surely rotating. Possibly an observer, we don't know. Possibly somebody who was a lookout, if they use that kind of thing, I don't know. But that is what was described as happening.
If you're still uncertain as to the origins of the flying triangles, here's something that I'd ask you to consider. If these flying triangles are indeed some form of unconventional stealth-type craft, that would mean there would have to be dozens of covert squadrons operating them, simply to account for the many thousands of worldwide sightings. It's an interesting proposition, and one that the skeptics and debunkers have difficulty accepting. But let's not kid ourselves. The United States Air Force can, of course, keep secrets. This photograph, for instance, of an F-117 stealth aircraft was taken in 1975, a full 15 years before the aircraft was finally unveiled to the public. But has modern technology reached the stage where it can manufacture triangular craft as big as football fields, that can hover silently, craft that can move from horizon to horizon in the blink of an eye, craft that can safely enter and emerge from our oceans? Those are the important questions we must ask. We might not at this present time have all the answers, but we will continue to probe in the right places in an effort to get to the bottom of this mystery once and for all. And when we do have some real answers, you'll find them here in UFOs Hard Evidence. Coming up next on UFOs Hard Evidence, are abductions real? What evidence links them to animal mutilations? An exclusive interview with Tony Dodd. In this exclusive interview with leading UK investigator Tony Dodd, we examine two specific areas of UFO research which often lends itself to scorn and criticism: alien abductions and animal mutilations. We invited Tony to tell us what first sparked his interest in the phenomenon.
Shape shadow. measuring approximately 150 to 200 foot across the wingspan. It was travelling almost exactly the same direction as us, which is due west, and overtaking us. I would say it was probably doing twice the speed that we were doing. Immediately we were a little bit concerned because the nature of the shadow was so sharp and well defined. You would expect it to be very close to
Controls like Manchester Airport?
No, we didn't, because we were clear of both the Liverpool and the Manchester zone. With a long way to go to Carnarvon, so we didn't really need to be in contact with anybody. We were still on Barton's frequency, but I thought it was inappropriate to notify them about it at the time.
Right, so we don't know whether they had it on radar, or even you were on radar to Manchester.
They tend to follow people that are fairly... we didn't really know what to do, so we just carried on, basically, to Carnarvon and reported it to the people there at the airport.
You logged it in your flying log, didn't you?
Yeah.
And your personal log, and I believe a log here at Barton as well.
Yeah, there's two logs. There's a personal flying log, and then there's also a log which is attached to the aeroplane. Anybody reports anything slightly unusual about the aeroplane or conditions of the day is put down on that log.
Did you talk to any air traffic?
Where our aircraft was, so I was quite concerned about the possibility of a collision.
Yeah.
So we had a look around everywhere to see what it was that was creating the shadow. There was absolutely nothing in the sky at all, and it was clear blue sky. It was much clearer day than it is today. So we were really taken aback by it, and we were just at a loss as to what it was that was causing it. So close to the zone on radar, just to make sure that they're not going to infringe into the airspace.
So you would have been on the radar?
It's possible that we would have been on radar, yes.
We don't know. We won't know whether this thing causing the shadow was on their radar.
No idea.
Even though we couldn't see anything visually.
Nothing at all, absolutely. Yeah. We did a few clearing turns to make sure it wasn't behind us or above or below.
Right.
There was absolutely nothing.
Yeah. Well, since that event, we've had two other pilots